Hey guys, Rebel Legend 95, recording live for Logan County Prison Cell. Watch out, I'm backing up here. Yeah, I'm alive. So I got really sick for a couple of weeks, and then I had to, take care of some responsibilities and work some things out outside of outside of my everyday life. So yeah, it's been a minute since I've been able to do anything. Honestly, I've been toying around with the idea of going back to the whenever I feel like it schedule because committing to every week or every 2 weeks or something really is not seeming to be working out for me. But as we're discussing the topic of change, here's another unusual tea, if that's a word, for me here, and that I think I've only done this once before. I may be wrong here, but I'm using characters that would be, I guess, considered more like folk characters or public domain characters, which typically I don't do. I think my last one was Tarzan and Conan. Typically I wouldn't do that because there's too many kind of sources to pull from. And at least Tarzan and Conan had like an original book series to each of them that you could, extract like canon information. Zorro, this fight, if you hadn't read the thumbnail, today's fight is Robin Hood and Zorro. As in the horseman known as Zorro, not Zorro from One Piece. And yeah, like these two don't technically have Zorro, I guess, has more of a canon because of the the radio show and the original TV show and everything. Robin Hood doesn't really. Even the original Robin Hood novel, which Robin Hood has also been officially, unofficially, been a character in many other old-time novels that actually predate his own, funny enough. But even before the original Robin Hood novel, that novel is based off of the folk stories of Robin Hood. So there's no real basis for the character to grab onto. I could go with the novel, but the novel also doesn't really give a lot of it's just like one isolated story. And there's many other stories that have been well regarded as part of the character that fully expand on that, but are made from completely different people and are meant to be completely different takes on the character. So it's really difficult to pin down what version of the character I would use, but typically with a few here and there differences, I would say these characters are generally the same version. I'll get into that. So we'll for example, we'll start with Robin Hood, right? So the origin of Robin Hood varies from version to version. In some cases, he's a poor farm. In some cases, he grew up as like a poor farmer, and that's why or a poor farmer's child, and that's why he, later adopts that lifestyle. And in some incarnations, he's he's a soldier in the Crusades who owns land and then comes back and finds out his land's been stolen. So now he lives on the run, and that's where he adopts the lifestyle. But regardless of his origin story, we know the commonality is, the steal from the rich, give to the poor. However, this motivation, not to get political here, but this motivation tends to carry a different message with it depending on the version. Like, in more traditional versions of Robin Hood, the message is these specific rich people are corrupt, and these specific townspeople are suffering because of it, so I will take from those who are doing bad things, who are basically stealing from the poor, and I will give the money back to them. And then in more modern incarnations, there tends to be a class disparity as an entirety, in its entirety, it needs to be dismantled. So that doesn't, that's just a rant. That doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about. Yeah, but either way, we know he is a very skilled outlaw. We know he is very good at, he's very strategic. He's very, he's only definitely had combat scenarios every so often in, like, battling the guy on the bridge and, being a very good fencer, fighting the Sheriff of Nottingham and everything. But but his outlaw lifestyle gives him a lot of stealth skill, gives him a lot of, gives him a lot of tactical planning, and he's kind of the Jack Sparrow-esque, the swashbuckling, gallant, a master criminal that always gets away. And he usually has help with his merry men, Little John and all that, Friar Puck, etc. But we know what we're here for. Robin Hood is the famous guy with the bow and arrow, right? He's he's the best marksman, the best archer in probably the world in this universe, right? And he's known for incredible feats of accuracy, like splitting an arrow, firing a bullseye and then firing another bullseye, splitting the first arrow in half, knocking arrows out of the air mid-flight with another arrow, not firing an arrow into the air and then firing another arrow into it to change its trajectory so it hits its target, things like that. Ricocheting arrows, which should by all accounts not be entirely possible, but whatever. Master feats of accuracy. And then again, maybe a little less known is his fencing ability. Like I said, he in many occasions fights the ends up fencing the can't think of his name. I'm very tired right now. Fencing the Sheriff of Nottingham, or fencing the usurper prince, right? And usually the Sheriff of Nottingham is considered the best fencer in, Nottingham. So and then you can go with the Star Trek episode where they live out the book, and he says, there's one thing you should know about me. I'm not from Nottingham. Yeah. So Robin Hood, that's really all the information I can offer. You going straight? Okay. That's really all the information I can offer about the character, because like I said, there's not a whole ton of feats person to person, or version to version of the story that are, that really mesh together. Moving on to Zorro. So instead of the Antonio Banderas version, we'd be going with the original Zorro of Don Diego de la Vega, right? Who is actually kind of weirdly on the opposite. He's on the same path, but the opposite origin. Where Don Diego's father is a very prominent and wealthy landowner, in California. So Diego pretty much grew up his entire life, he had a privileged life. However, he was sent to Spain to become a master swordsman. And I believe at this point in time, the Spanish were considered like the top sword fighters in the world, or at least in the Western world, or what would be considered the Western world now. With that, he kind of takes a Bruce Wayne kind of position where he, of course, he has this identity of a privileged, lazy, in his case, kind of bookworm, rich boy. But as we know, by night he puts on a mask and a hat and rides a black horse and becomes the horseman known as Zorro. And he fights injustice, and he fights for the oppressed people. Similarly to Robin Hood, the people who are being, subject to an abuse of power. Now, Zorro is, as I've said, a master swordsman, master fencer, and has regularly beaten, in many incarnations, military personnel who are, by their own admission, expert swordsmen. And he also has that same sort of adventurer kind of, ability to him, where he can always escape from, he can always avoid capture. He is also generally because he tends to go out more towards, at night. He is also a master of stealth. No, I don't want to say master, but he uses stealth pretty prominently, and he he uses tactics and surprise and whatnot. And I think one thing that can, so getting into this fight, one thing to consider, if I can segue here, is that Zorro is likely, A, from just being from a different time, and B, having more of a privileged upbringing. Zorro is probably phenomenally much more educated than Robin Hood. Robin Hood is by no accounts dumb, but even if we say Robin Hood is a soldier who fought in the Crusades, or a former soldier who fought in the Crusades, Zorro has defeated military personnel in his own right. Not guys in armor or anything, but again, he fights people who have been trained and have fought in wars. So that's not a it would give, even if we gave that to Robin, it would not be a determining factor. They're both generally stealthy and tactile, but like I said, we can assume Zorro probably has a much better education than Robin, so I would think that his tactics would reflect that. Now, again, Robin Hood is probably, I would say, an expert level fencer in his own right, but I don't think there's any way he's winning a sword fight versus Zorro. That's his thing. However, the real question is, could Robin, does the bow and arrow, right, does that give that's kind of the determining factor. Does the bow and arrow give Robin the win, right? Does having that long distance option, as well as a close distance option, does having that long distance option give Robin the win? And I don't think it does, primarily because like, while both of these characters are stealthy, I think Zorro's more prominent use of stealth. Like, Robin and the Merry Men tend to do like a Trojan horse kind of a effect, where they sneak into the castle and then they jump out and they fight everyone. Whereas Zorro, Zorro usually ends up getting caught by accident, or by somebody very perceptive, or having his cover blown by somebody, and ends up having to fight his way out of things. But I would say, has a more prominent use of stealth. And again, that, the black, the all black attire would contribute to that. Whether they were fighting in the desert at night, or if they were fighting, in Sherwood Forest, that would likely help him. So a long-range weapon like that, like a bow, would likely get mitigated by the ability to, like, blend into your surroundings and avoid being detected. Because, you can't fire a bow at something you can't see, right? If you don't know it's there. So Robin having the reflexes and the quick draw that he has with the bow is kind of mitigated by that. As well as Zorro is, Zorro, I don't think has many feats of speed with deflecting anything, but I'm sure, is it likely that he could, like, slice an arrow out of midair or something, or dodge an arrow? Maybe not, but again, I can't really speak to, like, speed feats, strength feats, things like that for these characters, because there's not a lot of continuity between all the different mediums. But I think that Zorro would be. I think that Zorro's his stealth, his education, and just, I think those are pretty. His stealth, his education, and his being better at something that Robin is also good at, right? Being the sword fighting, right? Because, like, if Zorro gets in close, the bow does not factor in anymore, right? The bow is only a factor at a distance, and like I said, Zorro can mitigate that factor by using stealth, right? Which, he is more known to use than Robin Hood is. And, Robin can't really fire a bow from 2 feet away. And, Robin would probably do all right in a sword fight with Zorro, but Zorro would ultimately kill him from that. Now, typically, Zorro... Well, no, I was going to say Zorro has a no-kill rule, but no, he doesn't. He definitely doesn't. And then the ending would probably be Zorro, Robin would die against a tree or something, and Zorro would leave the Z on the tree, and then, and say something, and, say Vaya con Dios or something, and walk away, right? So that's how I think that would go. Again, not the type of fight I would normally do. Very awkward for me to, like, kind of discuss this, but I'm kind of glad I did it, though. It got me out of the slump here. So anyway, hopefully I can get another episode out to you guys soon enough. Either way, Verbal Engine 95, see ya.